Our directions for this problem are to divide using long division. We have a polynomial divided by another polynomial. So we're going to use the traditional long division process to go through and do this long division. It's a lot like doing long division with regular numbers. First we have our long division symbol, which looks like that. Inside of here is what we are dividing, which would be this first polynomial here. When you do that, you can copy it down, but if you are missing any powers of x, you should put a 0 in there for that. So let me take a look. This is in standard form. We have x to the third power first. That's our highest power of x. Then next would be an x squared term, and then next an x term, and then finally a number. So we do have our polynomial in standard form, and we are not missing any powers of x. So I can just copy those down. And then from there, we are dividing by this polynomial, x squared minus 5x plus 6. That again is in standard form. So we'll just copy that in front. When you go through and do long division, what you would like to do is come up with a value here on the top. We'll take whatever we write here on the top and multiply that by this polynomial in front using the distributive property. We will put the corresponding terms in the correct column. Here's our x to the thirds, here's our x squareds. This would be our x's, and then finally constants on the end. And then we will subtract. And we'll go through that process until we are done. To figure out what goes in the top, the first part of that process, you should take the first term here inside of our long division symbol, which is an x to the third, and you should divide that by whatever your lead term is out here in front. So for this problem, we would have an x to the third power over an x squared, and if you reduce that down, you just get an x. So I'm going to take an x and I'm going to put that up here in the top. And what I'd like to do is keep all of the columns with like terms all together. So this first column here is going to be my x to the thirds, here's my x squareds, and so on. So for this x to the first power, I'm going to write that above our minus 14x term. So that's our first step. Do lead term divided by lead term, put that up at the top. From there, take whatever it is you just wrote up here in the top and multiply that by all of the terms in front using the distributive property. X times x squared is x cubed, and I'm going to put that in the x cubed column. Now x times a negative 5x, our second term here, x times negative 5x would be a negative 5x squared. I'm going to put that in the next column, in the x squared column. And then in our next column, I'm going to do x times 6, which would give me 6x. That's a positive, 6x. So let me write that in there. And then from there, we do our third and final step of this cycle, and that is to subtract. Books do the subtraction a few different ways. Sometimes they just put a subtraction symbol out front and want you to come out here and grab it each time. Other times they will put a subtraction in front of each one of the terms that I just wrote down in green. That's a little bit easier for most people. People tend to make less mistakes, so that's how I'm going to do this. This x to the third term here, what we want to do is an x to the third minus x to the third. And then in our next column, we have a negative x squared, and then we want to do a minus this negative 5x squared. So that's going to change the sign, and that'll make that a plus. And then we have a negative 14x, and then we want to subtract off this positive 6x. So I'm just going to put a subtraction symbol there. Basically, in that subtraction step, I am going to go through and change the sign of each one of the terms that I wrote down previously in green. This first term was positive, now there's a subtraction in front. This second term was negative, but subtracting a negative is a plus, so I changed the sign there, and the same thing with that third term. Now we can go through and do just what's in each column. So x to the third minus x to the third, those cancel out. In the next column, I have a negative x squared plus 5x squared. That would give me a positive 4x squared. The next column is a negative 14x minus 6x. That's a minus 20x. And then on the end, we have that 14 with nothing underneath it, so I can bring that straight down. And that's the process. We're going to do that over and over and over again until we get to the end. We will do first term divided by first term to figure out what we're going to put in the top. Use the distributive property. We'll write down terms in green next, and then finally subtract. And you keep doing that until you run out of space here, basically, or your power of x here is smaller than the power of x out in front when you look at those lead terms. Right now they're the same. It's an x squared and an x squared. This is not smaller, so we have to do this at least one more time. All right, so to get started, lead term divided by lead term. So on this one, I'm going to do a 4x squared divided by x squared. You can kind of do that off to the side or do it in your head. You wouldn't have to write it down. 4x squared divided by x squared. Those x squareds would cancel and just give us a 4. So up here in the top, I'm going to put a positive 4, a plus 4, and I'm going to put it in the constants column because 4 is a constant. Then using the distributive property, take that 4 and multiply by each of the terms in front. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. 4 times negative 5x is a negative 20x. And 4 times 6 is a positive 24. Your last step in the cycle is to subtract. This positive 4x squared will become a minus. This negative 20x is going to become a plus, and the plus 24 on the end is going to become a minus. So doing that subtraction step, I'm changing the sign of each one of those, and now I can just look at each column and do whatever's in each column. So 4x squared minus 4x squared is 0x squared. Those cancel. Negative 20x plus 20x, those also cancel. And positive 14 minus 24, when I do that, that would give me a negative 10. We keep doing that three-step cycle until our power of x here, down at the bottom, is smaller than our power of x in front. Right now, our power of x in the bottom, we have a negative 10. So that would be an x to the 0. And that x term in front, that's an x squared. So our power of x here is smaller than the power of x there. So we are done with the long division process. All we need to do now is write our final answer in its final form. And to go through and do that, what we are going to do is write it this way. We are going to take our answer here, our quotient, and write that out. So that is an x plus 4. And then what we're going to do next is add our remainder, which is a negative 10, over our divisor, what we were dividing by, and that is an x squared minus 5x plus 6. So our final answer is your quotient plus your remainder over your divisor. So it would look like this. Another option you could do, but it is purely optional. We do have a minus 10 here on the top, or a negative 10. You could take that negative in front of the 10 and make that a subtraction in front. So if you did that, it would look like this. We still would have our quotient in front, which is the x plus 4. But then instead of adding a negative fraction, you could say minus, and then just have a positive 10 in the top with your x squared minus 5x plus 6 on the bottom. Either one of those would be perfectly fine answers for your final answer on that.